There's something I don't really like in the pharma industry, which is we tend to over-victimize the patients. And we tend to forget that they are people, and then we just see them as patients.
The mother sitting in a waiting room with her son, asking the same quiet question. Does anyone truly understand what I'm going through? That question is the crack in the system. Somewhere inside this complex, fast-moving healthcare world, there are leaders who believe that technology should never be the hero. People should. And my guest today is one of those leaders. Jose Maria Guido Avila, a global leader in patient experience and digital health at Sanofi, a voice of clarity in a noisy world, and someone who's helping redefine what truly human healthcare could look like.
The mindset of repeating the messages to the doctor to trying to convince them to prescribe, it has created a cycle where doctors are expecting pharma to come and tell them, but they also at the same time, they don't like to speak to pharma because they like to be independent.
What does humanizing digital mean to you?
I used to talk about a concept called the digital equivalent of a smile. The rep interacts with the doctor. The rep can see, or the MSL, they can see if the doctor is smiling or is having a positive body posture or negative. So you can see that if your customer had a good experience face to face. But in digital, how do you know that your customer is smiling? What is the digital smile?
Over 350,000 health apps exist today, and yet 85% of them are abandoned within 2 weeks. We are building more, but patients are feeling less supported. Why does pharma struggle to convert digital innovation into patient impact?
So doctors are using ChatGPT for even in front of the patient. And they're asking questions like, hey, ChatGPT, can you explain this very scientific concept to a patient? And then so they get the answer, they read it in front of the patient. So this is happening as we speak. On the other side, the patients are asking the same questions to the doctors. The doctor just told me about this biomarker. What is it? And then ChatGPT is pulling data from the Google AI overviews, Perplexity. They're pulling information to people, and that's changing behavior. Multiple pharma companies are thinking, let's develop our own ChatGPT for patients, or let's develop our own ChatGPT for doctors. Again, they're thinking about it as from what they want to achieve rather than from where the people are and how the people are behaving.
Chema, welcome to Drug Diaries. If you've stayed with me till this point, you've already earned my instant respect. And I mean that. In a world where social media is designed to distract us, where most people are scrolling for entertainment, you stayed because you are searching for knowledge. And that tells me something about you. It tells me that you are genuinely curious about science, innovation, and the future of healthcare. And if I'm honest, that makes two of us. I deeply value the people who subscribe to this channel, not just for the numbers, but for the ideas, the feedback, the messages, and the suggestions that help shape what Drug Diaries become next. So if you find value in what we're doing here, I have one small favor to ask. Please subscribe. Join this movement of curiosity, connection, and learning, so you and I can keep growing, questioning, and spreading awareness through this platform. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Drug Diaries. There's a quiet truth in healthcare that we don't talk about enough. A truth everyone in the industry feels, but very few are willing to say out loud. Today we have more technology than ever, but somehow patients feel more alone than ever. Billions spent on digital transformation, thousands of apps, AI tool promising miracles, dashboards measuring everything except the moments that actually matter. And still, the mother sitting in a waiting room with her son, the man waking up every morning struggling to breathe, the family trying to understand a diagnosis that changed their world overnight. They're all asking the same quiet question. Does anyone truly understand what I'm going through? That question is the crack in the system. It's the place where the entire house of digital innovation, the apps, the analytics, the automation starts to feel hollow if it isn't built on something deeper. Humanity, empathy, lived experience. And that right there is what today's conversation is all about. Because somewhere inside this complex, fast-moving healthcare world, there are leaders trying to rebuild the system from the inside out. Leaders who believe that technology should never be the hero. People should. And my guest today is one of those leaders. His work has shaped how one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies think about patient experience. He has spent years sitting between two worlds, the clinical and the human, translating one into another. He leads the global initiatives that touch the lives of people living with chronic debilitating conditions, from respiratory illnesses to immunology, And he's been quietly influencing how the next generation of digital health, AI, and patient support will unfold. But what makes him remarkable is not just what he knows, but how he thinks. It's his belief that behind every data point is a story, behind every program is a person, and behind every patient journey is a human being fighting for their everyday life. Today, he is here to share what he's learned, the mistakes we keep repeating, the truths no one talks about, and the future he believes we must build before it's too late. My guest today is Jose Maria Guido Avila. He fondly goes by Chema, a global leader in patient experience and digital health at Sanofi, a voice of clarity in a noisy world, and someone who's helping redefine what truly human healthcare could look like. Chema, welcome to Drug Diaries.
Thank you. And thank you for the kind words. I'm I'm really honored to be here, and I'm really grateful for the way that you described me. I would describe me more as a person who likes to make change, but I'll take your description every day.
Yeah. Thank you, Chema. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show today. And to begin with, Chema, may I request you to please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes. So I'm Jose Maria Guido Avila, as you well described my name, but I ask everybody knows me as Chema, and I'm currently working in Sanofi as global patient experience lead. And I've been working in Sanofi for the past 7 years. And in the pharma industry, I've been almost 22 years. I know I look younger, but I've been already
Wow.
for almost 20 years, more than
You
20
do.
years. Yeah. um, and what else can I say about me? I mean, I
Wow.
normally like to say a few things about me outside of work to introduce myself. So I'm really
Hmm.
passionate outside of work. I'm passionate about uh, my family, my kids. So I have a family with two kids. They're very young. They're two boys, and I love spending time with them. I love to play tennis.
Wow.
So whenever there's a chance, if anyone is listening and wants to have a match and they live in the Boston area, I'll be happy to play. And I also like to paint. I have a I have a taste for painting Japanese manga and superheroes. So if you want to see my Instagram account, I'm happy to share it as well, where I post all my paintings.
I would love to check out your paintings and also take up on your offer of playing tennis, a game of tennis when I'm in Boston next.
Next, perfect. You got it.
Right. Chema, thanks for that introduction. And you know something I've realized after interviewing so many leaders in this space is no one ends up in patient experience world by accident. This isn't part of the industry you choose for power or prestige. It's a part of the industry you end up in because something moves you there. And I think for our audience, whether they are scientists, executives, or patients, understanding the human behind the title gives us a new lens through which everything else suddenly makes sense. So, Chema, let me start with you. What drew you into this space originally? Right.
Actually, I will probably be your outlier in that statistic that nobody ends up here by accident. I
Right.
did end up here by accident, I have to say, multiple times. I think that's the story of my career, and I'm happy to share it because it's been so. So I didn't plan to join the pharma industry in the beginning. So when I started my so when I ended up when
Right.
I finished college, I did my bachelor degree in marketing, and then I did a specialization in
Hmm.
advertising. So my my ambition
Right.
was to go into these FMCG companies, Coca-Cola, or like these big brands with huge of advertisement budgets. That was my idea.
Right.
That was my thinking back in the day. And it was my sister who introduced me to the pharma industry because my sister is a pharmacist and she was already working in a pharma company. And she told me about
Okay.
opportunity. So she explained it to me. So I was like, maybe why not? So I entered the pharma industry more without really knowing what to expect. And my first day, well, my first week in the company, it was fascinating. I was fascinated because they took me out. They sent me to visit a doctor with in the biggest psychiatric
Mm.
hospital of Latin America, and that changed my life
Right.
because I remember I went to the emergency. It was the not the major emergency room. It was the intensive care, and I had to visit the doctor in that intensive care.
Mhm.
And I remember entering the place and looking at all the patients that this doctor had. One of those patients came behind me, and she started talking to me like a very like normal, like normally. So, but I was obviously a
Mhm.
bit nervous because and I never expected to have a patient interaction like on my first week. Um, so we had the
Yeah.
conversation. The patient left, and the doctor told me. Again, I remember because that changed my life. The doctor said that patient has schizophrenia comorbid with obsessive
Mm.
compulsive disorder. However, the doctor asked me, "Do you
Right.
think is this patient lucid? Did, did you realize that she has a disease, that she has a mental issue?" And I was like, "No, actually no." And the
Mm.
doctor told me that's because that's thanks to the product that you're going to promote today. And I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Oh, wow.
I realized what the benefit of the product that I had because obviously I knew everything. I knew the information about the product, the dosage, and the information prescribe the prescribing information. Really seeing it in
Mm.
real life, and then again that was so. Then I moved to oncology, and then once in oncology, I was in Mexico. I never expected to go to Germany, and my plans was never Germany. But then the opportunity in Germany came, so I moved to Germany in oncology, and then in Germany
Right.
I got the opportunity to go into consumer healthcare. But again, consumer was never in my plans. I was always looking for specialty care, oncology, immunology, these kind of things. And then consumer opened up a whole new
Mm.
opportunity for me in marketing. And so it's been, and then ultimately so all of this part of my career that I'm describing was in HCP marketing. And when I was
Right.
when I was giving the opportunity to do patient marketing or patient activation or patient experience, whatever you want to call it, I I
Mhm.
I actually asked the hiring manager. I asked him why? Why me? I've never done patient marketing. How
Mm.
how?
Yeah.
And he told me that he wanted me to apply the mindset that I was bringing into the customer experience because I was applying a lot of customer experience into omni-channel and HCP marketing, and he told me I want you to apply that to
Mhm.
patients, and that's what I did. Again, it was not in my plans, but someone saw that opportunity to plug my expertise or my way of thinking into something that I could never expect, and here we are. Um, so yeah, but now I understand again. So I now I do that connection of that patient back in the day, looking at that benefit, looking at how that patient was having a better life despite having those limitations of that uh, mental condition. And I fast forward to today,
Right.
and I'm doing the same. Right? I always have, even if I haven't worked in patient marketing my whole career, I've always worked to make having that patient in mind. That patient from that very initial week of my
Right.
pharma experience. Yeah.
Wow. That's a wonderful story, and it's fascinating to see how our everyday experiences uh, help us choose the path that we want to be on, accidentally or deliberately. So that's a beautiful anecdote you shared, and thank you so much for sharing that. And Chema, I saw your post about winning the MM plus M award. Many congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And and I love the way you described sitting beneath the chandeliers at Cipriani, trying to look composed while replaying years of work in your mind. And you also mentioned something incredibly important, that patient themselves were the ones who made you believe in the direction of this campaign.
Oh,
Just inside that collaboration with patient advocacy groups, what did patients teach you that
mhm,
fundamentally changed the trajectory of the campaign
mhm.
that team wouldn't have discovered using traditional research alone?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I was reflecting on those years because it was a personal, like it was a personal achievement. Because like I said,
Right.
so if I go back into those days, I remember for that specific indication, that the
Mhm.
award was that we won. The patients are completely different, and I remember when I first heard about these patients, how they were suffering. So there's something. Okay, I need to give you some background also before. There's something I don't really like in the pharma industry, which is we tend to over victimize the patients, and we
Mm.
tend to forget that they are people, and then we just see them as patients. Whenever I remember when I first joined patient marketing or patient experience, a lot of people were asking me for the videos of explaining the unmet need and showing the patient suffering. It could be either showing the patient suffering and talking about the burden of the disease,
Hmm.
and then on the other side it would be like happy patients. I would have like those two extremes, and I was like, you are
Yeah,
so to
before,
me,
after.
yeah, and I was like, this is not how this they are people. They're not patients. But just because they
Yes.
have a disease, that doesn't mean that they are the same person, that they behave the same, or that they have the same interests, right? So they only have a common disease. So
Hmm.
I remember when I saw the first research of those patients that I realized that these patients lack a lot of empathy because
Mm.
they're craving for the empathy because in general, society tends to have a stigma on those patients, tends to put a
Yes.
stigma on the patient, even in some cases, even the doctors. And I can tell you when I mentioned this in front of doctors, they got really angry with me
Hmm.
because they were like, "What do you mean we don't have empathy? We are doctors. That's why we're doing
Yeah.
this." But it truly is what the patients tell you. The doctor is not listening to me. I try to tell them, and they are judging me,
Mm.
because there's a big correlation with cigarettes and with smoking. So there's this feeling that the
Mm.
patients caused their own disease. So anyway, so I saw that research, and then we created some different creative concepts to test for traditional market research. And I was in this meeting. Imagine me in the meeting. Chema was like 3 months in the job, 4 months in the job, and I present the images, and we got trashed. Like people even like telling me
Oh
like
dear.
almost telling me this is crap. Like this is not okay. This is not the level of things. And we had really negative comments. And I was actually I remember I was just listening to the feedback and trying to reflect all.
Sure.
And then
All
I
right. Okay.
realized that nobody in the room had the same age as the patients that we were targeting. And some people had like in the 40s, other in the 50s, other in the 30s, and I stopped them and I was like, guys, none of you has the same age, average age as our target population. So what if this resonates with them but not with you? You're being biased. And I said,
Mm.
let's go and ask them. So we went to ask the patient advocacy groups, and we showed them, and they were like, so the happy patients, because we have different options, right? We had the happy patients, and they were like, yeah, this is
Yes.
nice, but it doesn't really make me do any action. But if this one has some sense of urgency,
Mm.
it doesn't make me feel good, but it prompts me to do something.
Yeah.
And this is what we chose it. And I had to fight for it because people didn't want it. They were like, "No, Chema, we don't want that. We want happy patients. We want to inspire hope in the patients." And and I was like, "But you have to listen to the patients. They're telling you, yes, this is going to inspire hope in me, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to still be sitting on my couch, and I'm not going to be reaching out to my doctors to receive your therapy." Um, so it took me a long time to convince them. I had to fight with multiple people for it. And then ultimately it felt really good, like as a good personal achievement to see that it was a great campaign and that it also got recognized at a higher level by other industry peers. So it was great.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's a fantastic case study, actually, a success story of diving deep into the patient sentiments and trying to see what sort of characters they relate with, as opposed to trying to push an image that we think is appropriate for the patients and allowing them to choose who they want to relate with.
Exactly.
That's a great insight, and no wonder you won the prize, because I wonder how many companies or marketers do this sort of research for every campaign. So that's kudos to you and your team for spending uh, so much time and also the real intention to come up with the campaigns that resonate with the patients. So
Thank you.
that's
I
brilliant.
do. Thank you. And I have a follow-up thought on that because I do think in
Sure.
pharma, we tend to do a lot of market research. We do message testing and
Mm,
positioning testing, and we do a lot of research. But I think in many cases we miss the point. Because we're testing. In many cases, we test for the messages that we want to push. To your point, and then if the message is well received, I have seen a lot of presentations on
mm,
market research when the agency comes back and, oh, well, the messages were well received. And then we just, we proceed instead of asking ourselves, is this really what the patients are? Is this triggering the right emotion that we want in the patients? Is this
mm,
really conveying the right message rather than what we want to push? So it's not about the lack of research. It's about giving
mm.
the research the right scope to really understand those patient behaviors.
Thank you for sharing that, Chema. Chema, we throw around so many words in pharma: digital transformation, patient engagement, innovation. But sometimes I think we forget that these words were supposed to mean something human. And you've used this phrase, humanizing digital. And every time I hear it, it makes me wonder how far we have drifted from that. So let's unpack it. What does humanizing digital mean to you?
you know, I used to talk about this a concept called the digital equivalent of a smile a few years ago.
Hmm.
Because when the whole digital transformation started for the pharma industry, it was before COVID, right? And then, if you remember COVID
Hmm.
times, everybody was talking about we're going to do webinars and webinars are the future, and there's not going to be any conferences anymore, and people were just like going completely into digital. um, and I remember um, I started receiving a lot of KPIs and reports about vanity metrics. What I like the concept of vanity metrics,
Yeah.
like something like we had an NPS of 90. Wow. And everybody would clap in the meeting. What was the industry
Mm,
benchmark? Oh, the industry benchmark is 60. We have 90. Great. And that's it. And then we will not consider any learnings from that. It was just like to come to clap to
yeah,
ourselves and have this vanity, right? And then, so
that's it.
I started to wonder. So if you, when you are in a when you're in a face-to-face environment and you talk to
Hmm.
to your counterpart, let's say a doctor, right? So the rep interacts with the doctor. The rep can see, or the MSL, they can see if the doctor is smiling or is having a positive uh, body posture or negative or so you can see that, right? So you know if your customer had a good experience face to face. But in
Mm,
digital, how do you know how do you know that your customer is smiling? What is the digital smile? So I
yes.
think it all comes back to so my point is I don't think we have done it so far because I think
Mm,
the focus of the pharma industry has been more on technology and the shiny toy,
yes.
and now let's gonna do websites and social media, and we're gonna push the same messages to the doctors, so the same messages that we wanted to remember. Um, So I think that for me, humanizing
Hmm.
the experience, it's more about going back to that digital smile and say, okay, let's go back to the example of the webinar. How many from the webinar, the typical report
Yeah.
of a webinar, it's you send the email links with a click-through rate of
Hmm.
80%. And then from the
Yes.
80%, from the 80% click-through rate, maybe 60% registers to the webinar. And then from the 60%,
Hmm.
only 40% attend. If you start looking into the journey about those people who who didn't sign up, for example, for those who didn't open
Hmm.
the email, can you send a different subject line?
Mm.
Can you try to invite them by a different channel? Can you mainly send them the summary of the webinar after, but only to them, not to everybody, but just to say for these people who didn't
Yeah.
bother to open my email, can I try a different channel? And then if they respond
Mm.
to that channel, then you will know that they had a positive experience because it was because
Mm.
they were not happy with the email, but they were happy maybe with a WhatsApp message. That tells you more, and that those insights, that those are the ones that start telling you, is this really human? Are you really being human? Are you considering how your customers are feeling and what experiences they are having with your content offering, with your channel offering? um
Chema, there's a statistic I came across recently. Over 350,000 health apps exist today, and yet 85% of them are abandoned within 2 weeks. And that tells us something uncomfortable, that technology is
mhm.
not enough. We are
Yeah.
building more, but patients are feeling less supported. Why is
Mhm.
that? Why does pharma struggle to convert digital innovation into patient impact?
Mhm. I think there are multiple I think there are multiple explanations for that. But I think in my experience, what I have seen is whenever someone thinks about an app or an AI for the patients or for the doctors, they start again from their own perspective, from what they want to achieve, and not from
Hmm.
how the people are behaving. Like, I'm gonna give you one example. I know
Yes.
I heard an example one day about an amazing, and I don't remember even who was. I think it was in a conference. It was a vendor, and this vendor was like this
Hmm.
this this AI. We're using AI to diagnose diseases, and they were like, and I was like, okay, tell me more. And then I think he was like, okay, so this is
Hmm.
a web based. It was a web based app that the doctors had to complete information about the patients, and the app would
Hmm.
use AI to identify the most accurate the most accurate diagnosis. And then I asked him the question,
Diagnosis.
that sounds no, yeah, that sounds like, I told him that sounds like a lot of work for the HCP because the doctor is going to have to think about, oh, I have this app, let me take it out, and he's going to have to take out his phone and he's going to have to collect all the information just for him to get a diagnosis. And I asked him, how many doctors are you actually using
Hmm.
it? No answer. No, because so again, they were thinking about it from so they were from the, we want to increase diagnosis, but they were not thinking about how the doctor is
Hmm.
actually behaving as a person, right? So if you think about social media,
Yeah.
TikTok, for example, imagine that TikTok said, "Oh, you know what? Actually, you just have to put all your preferences in the database, and then TikTok is going to push videos to you." That never happens, right? So you just download
Yeah.
TikTok, and then you immediately start getting the videos,
Yeah.
and then the experience starts to personalize. So it's, imagine, so you have that kind of expectation that
Hmm.
a effortless content towards you versus a vendor saying you have to do all these efforts.
Yeah.
So that's why I think there's no these behaviors are not considered when we are developing these solutions. Um, and I have a lot of examples like that. And now more recently,
Hmm.
my favorite topic has become um, how so generative AI conversational tools for patients and for doctors, right? Because for me, that's the
Yes.
future now. Well, not the future, actually. Now, this is it. This is now. So,
Hmm.
doctors are using ChatGPT for even in front of the patients. And they're
Hmm.
talking, they're using it for,
Yeah.
they're asking questions like, hey, ChatGPT, can you explain this very scientific concept to a patient. And so they get the answer, they read it in front of the patient. So this is happening as we speak. And so on the other side, the patients are asking the same questions to the doctors. The doctor just told me about this biomarker. What is it? And then ChatGPT is pulling data from whatever Google AI overviews, Perplexity. These LLMs, they're pulling information to people, and that's changing behavior. That's how people are behaving. So I'm very sure that multiple pharma companies are thinking, let's develop our own ChatGPT for patients, or let's develop our own ChatGPT for doctors. Again, they're thinking about it as from what they want to achieve, rather than from where the people are and how the people are behaving. So I think we need to overcome that. We need to overcome that first step of not thinking of the patient first, or not thinking of the HCP first as a person. And once we overcome that part, then things are going to flow different.
Very well said. And Chema, every industry has blind spots, but pharma's blind spot is unique. It's the mistaken belief that better tools automatically create better experiences, like you just mentioned in the previous question. In your experience, where is the real bottleneck? Is the problem cultural or structural or even deeper?
That's a good question. I think probably my only hypothesis on this would be, so if you think about, if you see the history of the pharma industry, how was the business model a long time ago? It was, you have a product, you hire an army of sales reps, you train them, you give them all the details about your brand, and then you visit doctors. You repeat the visit and repeat until you convince the doctor to prescribe, and then you organize events. So it was this model was proven to be successful, and it was very profitable, right? So, and I think that model is shifting. But I think the mindset hasn't changed. The mindset of repeating the messages to the doctor, to trying to convince them to prescribe, it has created a cycle where doctors are expecting pharma to come and tell them, but they also, at the same time, they don't like to speak to pharma because they like to be independent. And also at the same time, all those mistakes from that time ended up having serious compliance issues, which is why now we have very tough regulations. So ultimately, that vicious circle, it's very difficult to break. And so that's why, so when I look at that vicious circle, on the one hand is the cultural part, that we're still, many people are still in the mindset of pushing messages to the doctors. The other side is also on the technology adoption, because again, pharma was one of the laggards when COVID happened. Pharma was one of the laggards. Because again, we were like, we have those armies of sales reps sitting at home without nothing to do. What do we do with them? And then the people that started to try to move that model of visiting the doctors to a digital environment, and that was not successful. I remember hearing a lot of, now the sales force can be remote. No. I mean, obviously, no, that was just a temporary solution, but I think people tried to just move that into remote. So I think it's adoption of technologies. It's also mindset and adoption. And it's also about probably more about becoming more human-centric, which instead of brand-centric, that it currently the pharma industry is, becoming more patient or human. Because again, it's not just patient friend, it's human-centric, because it's doctors are humans, patients are humans, market access, key decision makers are humans, KOLs are humans, patient advocacy groups, patient advocates are humans. It's about understanding.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, Chema, we've all seen this play out. A new tool appears, whether it's AI, VR, or digital therapeutics, and suddenly teams rush to launch something, anything, and just to say they did. But innovation without purpose is just noise. And you've spoken quite passionately about this. You've warned us about shiny toy syndrome. And I often think that if we could pause the whole industry for 60 seconds and whisper one sentence into everyone's ear, we could prevent years of wasted time. And I'm curious, what's your sentence? What's the one truth every pharma leader should hear before starting a digital project?
Oh my gosh. I have multiple. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind when you were framing the question was uh, someone told me the pharma industry has more pilots than the aviation industry. Uh, that's what I would say.
I
Probably,
like
I would
that.
say like I would start with that before doing that pilot. Think twice about trying to, because yeah, you're right. I remember you reminded me of another example. I remember this guy came to me with a very amazing best practice, and he was like VR. And we're gonna explain the
Mm,
mechanism of action with VR, etc. And he was gonna bring the glasses to the doctors at the office. And I was like, and my question was, that's one visit. What do you do when you visit next month? Are you gonna do another video, another VR? Is the doctor gonna be as excited as he was in the beginning? And do you have a content plan for VR videos? And and all of these questions, like, but again, and then he ended up responding. He ended up, this is just a pilot. If it works, then we'll figure it out later. And then this is that's why I would say, remember, before doing that pilot, remember that the pharma industry has more pilots than the aviation industry, probably.
I love that. Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, the pilots everywhere and proof of concepts leading nowhere. So, Chema, I want to move from theory to reality for a moment because behind every strategy deck, there's a there are real human beings whose lives are touched and or not touched by what we design. So let's talk about a moment where things worked and why. Could you walk us through a patient-first initiative you've led?
Oh, um, yes, I think, again, this is a personal satisfaction, and it's also coming back to the beginning of my career. But I keep it close to my heart because,
Sure.
um, and I can speak more about it because it was a long time ago, so it was about attention deficit disorder. So I was the product manager for a attention
Mm,
deficit disorder brand in Mexico, and I remember
right.
that so when I took the brand, we were we were number 11 in terms of ranking into the organization, right? So we had 10 more products in the organization selling much more than us, and our budget was really really low. And I remember I was like, what am I going to do with this? Because obviously it was my first experience as a as a brand manager, and they were like, here it is.
Hmm.
Here is a brand that we don't care about it. You do whatever you want with it. And well, they didn't say those words, but that was the that was the idea. So I remember I I went to talk to each one of the field force, because we had a very concentrated field force, and
Hmm.
they had a very concentrated universe of physicians, very small. And I remember I went and I told them, I want you to select one physician and one patient advocate
Hmm.
from your area, from your territory. So
Right.
I spoke to each one of them. I remember their faces. I remember everything. And so they all conveyed, this was very interesting because the insights from the doctors and from the patients were exactly the same. They were, we want the kids with attention deficit disorder to thrive at the same level as other kids, because there was this misconception that ADHD were preventing them from being excellent kids, or from excelling at home, or in the school, etc. Um, so in Mexico there is this, the grading system is from 1 to 10. 10 is the maximum. And I
Hmm.
remember
Right.
one of the patient advocates said, I want my kid to be a 10 kid, you know, a 10 out of 10 kid. And that resonated. I was like, that is it. So it's not that the kid doesn't have the capacity, right? But the mother itself, she thinks that the kid doesn't have it, and the doctor, they cannot explain it. So we came up with a program where the reps had a specific budget allocated for patients, patient and doctor. It was the patient and doctor discussions locally in their own territories, and they would bring more parents to those talks, and they will talk about 10 out of 10 kids, and the rep was able to spend the money in the way that they wanted. They could print flyers from our marketing promotional materials, etc., or they would spend the money on something else. And I remember going to those presentations. I didn't go to all of them, but I went to many, and listening to the doctors, listening to the parents in the audience saying, like, when my kid took the other medication, they became a different kid to the point that they were not themselves anymore. And I don't want that. I would prefer my kid to be a 6 out of 10 kid, but be themselves rather than losing their personality to this medicine. So anyway, so with that education that we provided with our brand, that our brand didn't take away the personality and allowed the kids to thrive being themselves, but just enhancing the areas that they had to enhance. That was very successful. And from the number 11 in sales, 2 years later, we were number. So because everybody started, so doctors started prescribing, and then patients started to accept the therapy. And I remember I used to see the take up curves that there was like very, very, very fast. So it was really, really, really rewarding for me to see that kind of.
Wow. And that makes us realize that every innovation, every excellent innovation needs a story, right? It's just innovation alone isn't enough. You've got to communicate the innovation in the right way to the right audience, and that's where the magic spot is.
Very important point. Innovation doesn't have to be digital always, right? We think about innovation as DTX or like something futuristic and a unicorn with red wings, etc. No, it's just doing things differently can also be innovation, right? So
absolutely, yeah, you said it.
Before we pause this conversation, let's take stock of what we've really uncovered so far. Chema has walked us through what patient centricity actually looks like before it becomes a buzzword, the months of debate, the moments when a campaign wasn't fully understood internally, and the decision to trust patient feedback, even when it challenged conventional thinking. We've heard how this work didn't start with technology or tactics, but with a simple, uncomfortable question. Are we actually solving a problem patients recognize as their own? We've talked about the tension between evidence and empathy, about why some of the most impactful ideas initially feel risky, slow, or misaligned with standard success metrics, and about what changes when patient advocacy groups move from being consulted to being true co-creators. But here's where we pause, because the next part of the story is harder. In part 2, we go into what happens after you commit to that path, how you protect patient truth when scale, timelines, global rollout, and internal pressure start to reshape the message. What leadership really looks like when you are defending human nuance inside complex organizations. If part 1 was about choosing to listen, part 2 is about choosing to hold the line. And that's where the conversation gets very real. So stay tuned for part 2. It's coming out very soon, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.